In my assignment, I studied the immediate impact Chernobyl had on people and then looked at the ongoing effects on people's lives, including their physical and mental health. Some of the footage you're about to see was filmed by a man called Vladimir Shevchenko. By making his film, The Chernobyl Disaster, The Severe Days, capturing the cleanup and the immediate aftermath, Shevchenko was subjected to fatal amounts of radiation and was ill during editing but continued to work. He later died of radiation sickness, but was not added to the official death toll. The captured footage itself is a primary source, but after editing the film as a whole becomes a secondary source. You are also about to hear readings of testimonies given by those who were affected by the disaster. The readings are translations from Alexeyevich Svetlana's collection, Voices of Chernobyl. The book itself again is a secondary source, as Svetlana compiled the collection, but the testimonies given within are all primary sources.
The Soviet government reports an accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in the Ukraine.
The nuclear accident is wrapped in an official veil of secrecy. There was absolutely no mention of it in this morning's newspaper.
Nuclear experts in both capitals say it appears that a meltdown has taken place and a fire is burning out of control.
Situations throughout the day. Readings are up to 100 times normal levels.
Soviet officials are now calling the Chernobyl nuclear plant accident a disaster.
Putting it out is going to be a very difficult problem. I don't think anybody has ever dealt with it.
Western nuclear experts are saying it is the worst nuclear plant disaster in history.
The widow of a fireman who was killed told her story. Her name is Ludmila Ignatienko.
At the morgue, they said, "Want to see what we'll dress him in?" "I do." They dressed him up in formal wear with a service cap. They couldn't get shoes on him because his feet had swelled up. They had to cut up the formal wear, too, because they couldn't get it on him. There wasn't a whole body to put it on. It was all wounds. The last 2 days in the hospital, I lift his arm, and meanwhile the bone is shaking, just sort of dangling. The body has gone away from it. Pieces of his lungs, of his liver, were coming out of his mouth. He was choking on his internal organs. I'd wrap my hand in a bandage, put it in his mouth, take out all that stuff. It's impossible to talk about. It's impossible to write about, even to live through. It was all mine, my love. They couldn't get a single pair of shoes to fit him. They buried him barefoot.
Does this look like fair on a pumpkin boy? How cruel you get. I started again, my pumpkin boy, to miss your hand.
After those first responders, hundreds of thousands of soldiers would be enlisted in the cleanup effort. They were called liquidators. Sergei Sobolyev, who helps run the Chernobyl Museum, talked about their efforts.
And what about the soldiers who worked on the roof of the reactor? The ones cleaning the roof got it the worst. They had lead vests, but the radiation was coming from below, and they weren't protected there. They were wearing ordinary, cheap imitation leather boots. They spent about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes on the roof each day, and then they were discharged, given a certificate and an award, 100 rubles. And then they disappeared to the vast peripheries of our motherland.
I looked at the photographs of Igor Kostin, taken from his book Chernobyl, Confessions of a Reporter. The book was a secondary source but contained primary first-hand sources. He is considered to be a documentary photographer and is widely accepted to be the only journalist within the exclusion zone, so we can assume his photos are not staged. He continued to work photographing those who had been affected. The photos do create emotional response due to the subject matter, and we can see in some photos that the subjects do pose for Kostin's shots. They are not all negative images, such as this photo of an old lady who refused to leave her house in the exclusion zone, carrying on her life in her home, despite the area changing dramatically. In order to get an idea of how many people were affected and the impact the disaster had on their lives, I had to look at a number of scientific reports, all secondary sources. I discovered when doing so how much bias could impact a source. Figures and statistics varied from as little as 52 people having suffered from health effects of Chernobyl to 1 million. I had to take into account the interest of the organisation who created the reports, such as the International Atomic Energy Agency, who would have a vested interest in making nuclear power seem safe. I came to the realisation that statistics can be manipulated in any direction, some making cancers seem related to the disaster, and some claiming there were no correlation whatsoever. The true fact is, nobody will ever know, for sure.
We're afraid of everything. We're afraid for our children and for our grandchildren who don't exist yet. They don't exist, and we're already afraid. People smile less, they sing less at holidays. The landscape changes because instead of fields, the forest rises up again, but the national character changes too. Everyone's depressed. It's a feeling of doom. Chernobyl is a metaphor, a symbol, and it's changed our everyday life and our thinking.